The flu. To most of us, a yearly ritual of misery. Nothing more. But now there's a flu out there unlike anything the modern world has ever seen.
The track record of this virus is just terrible.
It's a disease that could kill the young and healthy in astounding numbers.
We are not talking hundreds of thousands of people. We're talking millions, many millions.
It's a virus potentially as terrifying as the most deadly plagues known to man. And it's just an evolutionary tick away from becoming highly contagious. Now, a fellowship of the world's leading scientists are in a race to understand the virus and make plans to prevent it from spreading.
Pandemic influenza will be one of the single greatest tests of our human system.
If it strikes, hospitals could be overwhelmed. Basic services could collapse. Civil disorder and chaos could spiral out of control.
If this virus does get away, I wouldn't paint a very pretty picture of what's going to happen.
Now go inside the race to understand the virus called H5N1, from the front lines in Asia to top secret labs around the world. Is it a false alarm or the birth of the superflu? She's just a little girl on her way back home. When she boarded this flight, she felt fine. But deep inside her, a deadly new microbe has already begun to commandeer her cells, turning a child into an engine of contagion. Every cough, every breath, every touch will leave a lethal imprint in the cabin. She is the carrier that scientists have been living in dread of for almost a decade. In hot zone labs around the world, scientists are preparing for this worst-case scenario as they race to keep up with a deadly new microbe that is always one step ahead of them. They've been tracking its genetic mutations as it moves closer and closer to becoming highly contagious. If it does, it could trigger a global pandemic more deadly than the world has ever witnessed before. The story begins in one of the most densely populated cities in the world, Hong Kong. In the midst of this modern metropolis, people still buy their poultry live. In March 1997, thousands of chickens in the region began to die of a mysterious new virus with shocking symptoms. World-leading virologist Robert Webster was astounded by its killing power.
It's a little bit like Ebola. It causes hemorrhaging, neurological disease, leaking from all of the vessels, and generalized damage. If we inoculate a chicken with this virus this afternoon, tomorrow that chicken will be dead.
But while the poultry epidemic raged out of control, the rest of the world was not taking much notice. It was just a disease killing birds in a faraway place. Then something happened that would set off alarm bells among the world's leading virologists. In May, a 3-year-old boy in Hong Kong was admitted to the hospital with what appeared to be influenza. Tests were performed for all the recent strains of human flu, but all came up negative. Then, before doctors could identify the disease, the boy died. They had a disturbing mystery on their hands, and they needed answers fast. They rushed virus samples from the boy to some of the world's premier virology laboratories that track the spread of influenza. Among them was the lab of Albert Osterhaus in Rotterdam.
A boy has died, influenza virus, that cannot be typed. Yeah, that's a scary message.
Osterhaus needed more information. Since scientists know that some human influenza viruses are also found in birds, the next logical step was to test for avian flu. Still, it was a long shot. Scientists had never seen a bird flu virus jump directly to humans.
All the textbooks will tell you that avian influenza viruses do not transmit to humans.
Osterhaus knew who could help. In Memphis, Tennessee, fellow virologist Robert Webster had been collecting samples of bird flu viruses for decades.
Ab Osterhaus called me up on the telephone and said, we've got this very strange virus that we can't identify. It behaves like an influenza virus, but we don't have all of the reference serum we need.
Webster sent Osterhaus the reference serum that contained antibodies to the 15 known strains of avian flu. Osterhaus tested the boy's virus against each of the antibodies. It was positive for the avian virus H5N1.
Indicating for us at that moment that we were dealing with an avian virus, the H5 influenza virus, which had not been seen in humans before.
The bird flu had made the leap from chickens to humans with deadly results. To understand just how frightening a new strain of flu like H5N1 is, you have to understand viruses. Microscopic parasites that are not fully alive until they inhabit a host cell. The H stands for hemagglutinin, the protein spike on the surface of the virus, the key to breaking into a cell. With common flu viruses that our bodies have encountered before, our immune systems eventually recognize their protein spikes and block them with antibodies. But H5N1 is new to humans, so the H5 spike goes unrecognized and is free to penetrate our cells. Once inside, the virus's genetic material enters the cell's nucleus, turning it into a cloning factory for the production of thousands of new viruses. Now the N, or neuraminidase protein, comes into play. It's the breakout artist that snaps the virus loose from the cell's surface, releasing a swarm of microbes that attack and kill more cells. This is what happened to the little boy in Hong Kong who died of avian flu. At the time, scientists were baffled.
I thought, well, it's just one of these freaky things. We're probably not going to see it again.
But he was wrong. Months after the boy's death, new cases of H5N1 began to mount in Hong Kong. Before long, at least 18 people were infected. 6 died, a fatality rate of 33% among known cases. Robert Webster began to fear the worst.
When there was a second case, and a third case, and a fourth case, I jumped on an aeroplane and went to Hong Kong.
Almost overnight, Hong Kong had become the front line in the global war against infectious disease. A SWAT team of virus hunters from around the world converged on the city. To stop the virus, they knew they'd have to solve the mystery of how it was spreading.
There had been 6 months that had elapsed between the first case and the second case. Again, our immediate thought was, boy, has this been spreading and we haven't detected it? What's going on?
Leading the team from the World Health Organization was the head of its influenza program, Klaus Storr.
When I arrived there, for me and many other influenza colleagues, it was clear that in the next couple of days we are going to see this virus spreading to more people. And if we don't do something profound and drastic, the pandemic cannot be averted.
The profound and drastic answer: kill all the poultry in Hong Kong. Government officials agreed. Over 1 million birds were slaughtered.
It looked a little bit like a team from Mars had just landed and sort of descended on the farm.
Farmers and sellers stood by as their animals were destroyed.
It's not only about the chickens in Hong Kong, it was about preventing a pandemic from occurring, and therefore it was the right decision to take.
In the aftermath of the slaughter, the once bustling market sat empty. In the months to come, no new cases of H5N1 appeared in birds or humans. The virus hunters breathed a sigh of relief. They'd got rid of H5N1 for good. Or was the virus in hiding, waiting for the next opportunity to strike? Flight 837 from Bangkok has just landed. The virus has now found a home on surfaces inside the plane where it will live for 48 hours. Plenty of time to find new hosts. In a short while, a new group of passengers will be taking their seats on their way to their next destination. And those getting off will take the virus with them. With the stamp of a passport, a microscopic killer has arrived on our shores. It spreads invisibly. It's about to hitch a ride into the center of the city where it will find thousands of new hosts. With an incubation period of 1 to 2 days, soon hundreds more will be infected. It's a hypothetical worst-case scenario, but scientists fear it for good reason. They know that the last pandemic with this deadly killing power happened less than a century ago. It was the late summer of 1918, and the killing fields of World War I were already strewn with corpses. But somewhere out there, another killer was lurking, one that would take an even higher death toll than the killing machine of war. In the US, the influenza pandemic exploded through overcrowded military barracks. With thousands of soldiers on their way to the front, the disease was set to spread to civilian populations across the planet. People were completely unaware of what was about to strike. Doctors had seen nothing like it before. First came a fever and cough. Then, within hours, patients developed a severe pneumonia. Victims bled out internally as their lungs and other organs were eaten away by the virus. The pandemic tore through cities with alarming speed. In New York City, observers reported victims boarding the subway with a mild cough and being dead by the time they arrived at their destination. Entire families were wiped out in days. In many places, daily life came to a halt. Public services were shut. Food became scarce. Even the supply of coffins ran out. By the time it was all over, the global death toll exceeded 50 million people. Since then, we've had 2 other influenza pandemics, each killing up to 1 million people. They were nowhere near as deadly as 1918, but they remind us that influenza pandemics occur roughly 3 to 4 times a century. According to the experts, we're overdue for the next one. That's why scientists were so determined to rid Hong Kong of H5N1 in 1997 and breathed a sigh of relief when it went away. For 6 years, there were no reported cases of H5N1 in humans. But all the while, the elusive killer was on the move. The avian flu was being spread in the droppings of wild birds that carry the virus without getting sick. Their migration had taken them all the way from Mongolia, across China, to Southeast Asia. The bird flu was about to return with a vengeance. At the end of 2003, the virus exploded through the poultry farms of Southeast Asia, infecting millions of chickens. Within 9 months, 44 human cases of bird flu resulted from contact with infected poultry. The team of scientists who'd been working together since the '97 outbreak in Hong Kong were once again on high alert.
When humans started to die in Vietnam and Thailand, then the alarm bells started roaring that this was really bad news.
It has become more lethal. It is more spread out. This is a much, much harder situation to control than Hong Kong.
Of the 44 patients treated for infection, 32 died. A mortality rate of 70% among known cases. Over twice as high as the initial outbreak in Hong Kong. This is what may make H5N1 so deadly. The process began when the virus entered our cells and started to replicate out of control. From there, it travels deep into our lungs, where it may trigger a lethal immune response. An army of cells and chemicals called cytokines sent out to attack the virus could instead cause deadly inflammation.
And we get what we call a cytokine storm, and which can be extremely toxic, and we essentially kill ourselves.
The virus alone may not kill us. Ironically, it could be tricking our own immune systems into doing the dirty work. Specialized cells called in to destroy the virus may instead inflame healthy tissues that leak blood and fluid into the lungs' tiny air sacs. The patient drowns. Fortunately, the bird flu has not yet become easily contagious among humans. But virus hunters are anxiously tracking H5N1's every move. In Thailand, WHO epidemiologist Bill Aldis keeps a close eye on opportunities for H5N1 to spread. At least one human case has come from an unusual source. Close contact between bird handlers and infected fighting cocks.
This close, intimate concern they obviously have for their birds, which are their means of livelihood, when you see that's where the virus is most likely to be transmitted. The possibility exists that some of these birds that right around us now could be carrying H5N1. It would not be at all impossible that could be the case.
Many of these prize cocks are transported to fights across Southeast Asia, where they could be taking the bird flu with them. But when it comes to transmitting H5N1, there's something else that's much more worrying to scientists. What if the virus evolves so it can spread through the air like the common flu? This is how scientists believe it could happen. Influenza viruses are made up of RNA, highly unstable genetic material that's constantly changing. Some of these mutations could make the virus less harmful, while others could transform it into a lethal pandemic strain. And sometimes viruses undergo an even more dramatic change. Scientists call it genetic reassortment. If H5N1 infects a person who already has a common flu, the two viruses could swap genes or reassort, creating a highly infectious and transmissible new virus. H5N1 may never make this leap. But it's in backyard farms like this that viral reassortment might unfold. In this environment, a person with a common flu could be infected with an avian flu virus at the same time. Also, pigs can be infected with human and bird flu viruses without ever showing symptoms.
If you're a cook for a pandemic, these are the ingredients you would like to have. And as long as this pot is on the fire, there's a possibility for a pandemic.
While H5N1 has not yet made this genetic leap to become airborne, it's mutating at a breakneck pace. And already there have been some disturbing changes. In early 2003, the virus began killing waterfowl that had previously carried it without symptoms.
Normally, this H5N1 virus has the capacity to kill chickens, but not aquatic birds, never been seen before. And so this is a really dramatic change.
Then there was another disturbing sign. In a zoo just outside Bangkok, 45 tigers died after being fed infected chicken. But there was worse to come. The virus was being passed from one cat to another, an ominous sign that it may now be contagious between mammals of the same species. Scientists wanted to know, could this happen in humans? At the Erasmus Medical Center in Rotterdam, Albert Osterhaus had been studying H5N1 infection in domestic cats.
What you see then is you see this here in a normal lung.
He discovered that H5N1 attacks cats' lungs in the same way that it does in humans. Then he decided to see what the virus was doing to the rest of the animal.
Did you remove the adrenal glands as well?
Yeah,
Okay.
I took those.
So the full list would be lungs, brain,
Heart,
liver,
kidney, spleen.
Virtually every organ was being ravaged by H5N1.
In all these organs here, we see the presence of these virus-infected cells. Yeah, so which you don't see here at all. Yeah, but we see them here all over the place. Yeah, and now we're talking liver, spleen, intestine, adrenal gland. Yeah, so basically we see the virus disseminated over the whole body of the cat. Yeah, and that was something for us that was not expected. So
and then Osterhaus's studies revealed something more. The virus had spread from one domestic cat to another, exactly like the tigers in Thailand.
Meaning that we now have a species where the virus doesn't only cause serious disease and mortality, but also spreads efficiently from animal to animal. And that's exactly the doom scenario that we have for a pandemic outbreak of flu, if that were to happen in humans.
In fact, was it already happening in humans? In 2004, an 11-year-old girl was rushed to a provincial hospital in northern Thailand. Only days earlier, she'd become sick after playing with infected chickens. Her mother and aunt had been caring for her, but her condition was rapidly deteriorating. Doctors put her on a mechanical respirator, but they were too late. After 3 hours, the girl died. Soon after, her mother and aunt became seriously ill with viral pneumonia. It proved to be H5N1. They had not been exposed to infected poultry. Epidemiologists believe that both women caught the virus through close contact with the girl while caring for her. 12 days after her daughter's death, the mother died. The young girl's aunt was the first person in this region known to have survived the bird flu.
ดูจากทีวีที่บ้านแหละแต่ก็ไม่คิดว่าจะมาถึงบ้านเราไงดูเห็นเขาเป็นอยู่ไกลๆแล้วก็ไม่คิดว่าจะมาถึงบ้านเราไงตอนแรกที่หลานเป็นนะยังไม่คิดว่า
Scientists believe that this is a case of human-to-human transmission. Still, H5N1 is not airborne. But for how long? By the end of 2004, the bird flu had spread across all of Southeast Asia. Scientists were more concerned than ever about the possibility of a pandemic.
There have never been an outbreak of avian influenza in so many countries at the same period of time. You see that there were cases in Indonesia, in Japan, in South Korea, in Vietnam, in Cambodia, Laos, Malaysia, Thailand.
In the face of a widening epidemic, Thailand declared war on H5N1. Local farmers who depended heavily on poultry for their livelihood joined the battle. In this village, household chickens recently died from bird flu. The infection control team has been called in. Now they have to spray a 2-kilometer area with virus-killing disinfectant. It has to be done every week for 2 months before the village is considered safe.
We are in a race against the H5N1 virus. We want to get there before it does. We want to preempt or anticipate and turn off, switch off a pandemic.
While Thailand waged war against H5N1, the bird flu epicenter shifted to Vietnam. Outside major cities, roadside checkpoints have become commonplace as authorities try to get the bird flu under control. But what if these measures don't work? If H5N1 does become airborne, the pandemic would move with incredible speed. This reconstruction of a computer model, developed by mathematicians, shows a small region in Thailand. The red dots represent newly infected people. The model shows how quickly H5N1 could spread throughout the population if it became highly contagious. Within 3 to 4 weeks, the virus would spread throughout the entire region. In another 8 weeks, all of Thailand and bordering countries would be infected. By then, the virus would spread across the globe. An infected but symptom-free person from Southeast Asia could be in virtually any major city in the world within 24 hours. Inside the World Health Organization's war room, this worst-case scenario is getting high-level attention. Here, scientists monitor nightmarish diseases like Ebola, Marburg, and H5N1.
There has been rumor of human cases in the region where the birds fell ill.
Mike Ryan heads the team that responds to outbreaks. But in the case of H5N1, he's far from confident.
If we're dealing with the pandemic today, this would be a nerve center for information management and monitoring and everything else. But to be quite frank with you, we will be monitoring a disaster without being able to do much about it.
Virus hunters around the world all agree that the best way to avert a pandemic is to control the spread of H5N1 in poultry, stopping the virus before it spreads to humans. If that fails, there are two more defenses: antiviral drugs and vaccines. Antivirals exist now and, if taken soon enough, might fight off infection. And possibly they could prevent a pandemic. Scientists think there's a chance an outbreak could be stopped in its tracks with a combination of antiviral drugs and quarantine measures. Instead of spreading, the isolated dots of infection are confined to a small area. But for intervention to succeed, the virus has to be recognized fast and reported immediately. And that would take an unprecedented level of communication between local villagers and scientists, with no time to spare.
We find that we have 2 weeks, 4 weeks maybe, to preempt or block off a global pandemic at source. Now, having said that, you should know that I'm speaking about something that's never been done before, ever, with any infection.
Even if local villagers recognize and report an outbreak immediately, there just aren't enough antiviral drugs available. Experts say that countries could need up to 3 million doses to extinguish an outbreak. But the antiviral stockpiles in Southeast Asia are nowhere near that.
The problem with flu is, if you haven't done the work beforehand, forget it. You are basically documenting a disaster.
But what about vaccines? People in the industrialized world are used to preventing each year's flu with a simple shot. But H5N1 is no ordinary flu, and it defies normal vaccine production. For over 60 years, scientists have made vaccines by growing and harvesting viruses inside chicken eggs. But the problem with producing an H5N1 vaccine is that it's as fatal to chicken eggs as it is to chickens. Now, inside Robert Webster's Level 3 biosafety laboratory, scientists have come up with a potential solution.
This is as far as we go.
Webster's team is working on a process called reverse genetics. It's used to make a harmless virus.
There's always lots of concerns about doing bad things by genetic manipulation. We're doing just the opposite. We're converting a bad virus into a harmless one.
With this genetic engineering technique, the gene segment that makes H5N1 lethal to chicken eggs is snipped off. Then, gene segments from H5N1 are combined with segments from a second virus that is engineered to grow rapidly. The new virus can now be grown inside eggs to produce vaccines. But there's a catch. The entire production process takes 3 to 6 months. Months we may not have. And even if we could make a vaccine in time, manufacturers around the world can currently only produce enough for 450 million people. That's for a global population of over 6 billion. And there's one more serious challenge. H5N1 is mutating so quickly that today's vaccine may offer little protection in a few months. For those on the front lines who are trying to prepare the world for the next pandemic, the lack of foresight is frustrating.
We have no problem whatsoever spending billions of dollars to protect our strategic, national or regional interests. No problem. Yes, when someone says Let's put together the capacity to rapidly produce an effective vaccine and ensure that we can produce a dose of that vaccine for every single individual on the planet. We seem to be caught in the headlights.
If a pandemic were to break out today, from H5N1 or another strain of influenza, the world would not be ready.
It's not a question of if it's going to happen. It's really when is this going to happen and are we prepared?
Once it goes to human, all our efforts are probably not going to amount to a heap of very much.
Flight 837 will soon be on its way to its next destination. The virus left on the plane will live on surfaces for about 48 hours. More than enough time to infect new human hosts. They'll be taking it with them to some of the busiest cities in the world. Within days, there will be thousands of new infections. If the world has time before the next pandemic happens, we may be able to build defenses. But if the bird flu becomes airborne tomorrow, this is the worst-case scenario that experts fear.
So I'm just going to put this mask on. Leave the mask on, Laura. Leave the oxygen mask on. Take you down to the intensive care.
Day 1. The first case of bird flu arrives on our shores. Only weeks ago, the virus silently emerged in a rural Asian province. A young tourist was exposed in Bangkok, and now she's fighting for her life. Even as doctors attempt to get the air into this little girl's lungs, the world as we know it is about to change forever. Our worst fears are just starting to be realized.
As health officials have feared, the superflu has arrived in the country. 5 confirmed cases have been admitted to hospitals in
Day 7.
3 in critical.
Around the world, people hear disturbing news through the media.
As health officials attempt to get the outbreak under control. So far, the virus has claimed 770 lives in Asia.
The global response is rapid. The World Health Organization declares a full-scale pandemic alert and advises all countries with pandemic preparedness plans to activate them immediately. The European Union and industrialized nations order full-scale production of an H5N1 vaccine, but it will be 6 to 9 months before it's available. Even then, there is a shortage of production capacity, so supplies will be limited.
For most of the developed countries, there will not be enough vaccines and antivirals for the entire population.
Day 12. The bird flu crisis escalates. Airline passengers must submit to screening for signs of flu. Heat imaging devices scan for fevers. But infected people take at least 2 days to show symptoms. Plenty of time for thousands to slip through. Day 15. Countries shut their borders. Roadside checkpoints test travelers for any signs of the flu. But with thousands of miles of porous borders, authorities are unable to keep the virus from crossing over.
There's probably no such thing as closing the borders if this thing starts spreading.
Day 16. As the pandemic widens, schools close. Public transport comes to a halt. Many businesses are also forced to shut. The economy begins to stumble. The bird flu outbreak sends shockwaves through global financial markets. Investors fear a drop in production and frantically sell off shares.
In trading today, the FTSE 100 had its biggest one-day fall.
70 billion wiped from shareholders' portfolios.
As infection spreads, ordinary people are desperate to get hold of antiviral drugs. But first in line are medical and mortuary workers, the elderly and the severely ill.
If people know that antivirals are life-saving, and there is some antivirals, but it's scarcity, yeah, well, what do you think will happen?
Week 3. Violent protests erupt over access to limited supplies of life-saving antiviral drugs.
Highways remain bumper to bumper.
Traffic mayhem as the exodus out of London continues tonight.
People flee urban areas to escape infection, but health authorities fear that they are taking the bird flu with them. Epidemiologists track the spread of the pandemic across the globe.
The worldwide death toll is now estimated to stand at more than 45 million. Martial law has been declared in key cities across the
Week
US.
6. As the death toll mounts, anyone with symptoms is advised to stay at home.
European cities have also been devastated by the superflu outbreak. New cases of infection continue to be reported. Death toll.
People are beginning to realize that they will have to fend for themselves.
It would come down to families supporting themselves. It would come down to the basic unit of society.
Hospitals across the country are overwhelmed. Even in the best of times, there are few extra beds, but now resources are stretched beyond the limit.
Imagine a situation where there will be queues in front of hospitals, where the primary healthcare centers cannot cope with the patients anymore, where the radio is going to tell the people on the TV, if you're not really very sick, please stay home.
Now mechanical respirators are in limited supply, and hospitals have run out of life-saving antiviral drugs. With no more room in intensive care, basement corridors have become quarantine treatment centers. Doctors face tough ethical decisions about who gets care.
If you suddenly have 5 times as many people, or if not more, who needs to be on the mechanical ventilator, and the ventilators are not there, what are you going to do?
Surprisingly, the patients most at risk are the young and healthy. Their strong immune systems are double-edged swords. While launching an attack on the infection, they are also killing healthy cells in the lungs. About 20% of those admitted to hospital will die. Week 8. The mounting number of dead bodies could become a serious public health concern. Around the world, mass burials are commonplace. In cities, the flu immobilizes fire and police departments.
The basic system of life will be threatened.
Fires and civil disorder spread out of control. Week 9. The pandemic nears its peak. Over 50% of all workers are out sick or caring for the ill. Farming and industry are crippled, and transportation comes to a standstill. Financial markets are in ruins. Trading floors are closed.
Financial analysts predict the economic fallout will surpass the crash of 1929.
Week 12. The death toll climbs to record numbers.
World Health Organization experts say the global superflu death toll now stands at 100 million and could reach over 150 million before the pandemic subsides. With most hospital systems at breaking point, many families are being forced to provide care for the sick at home.
For families that have survived the worst of the epidemic, many are now tired and depressed.
Across the country, severe food shortages have been reported as production and transportation of goods has come to a standstill.
In 20 weeks, the superflu has swept across every nation on Earth. In cities across the world, the streets are quiet. The pandemic has run its course. The worldwide bird flu death toll stands at over 130 million. In many countries, the final count may never be known. But it isn't over. A second wave of the virus is expected in the spring. But what if these doomsday scenarios are wrong? There are scientists who say that if H5N1 was going to make the genetic leap to become an airborne virus, it would have already done so. And even if H5N1 does evolve into a pandemic strain of avian flu, it is highly unlikely to be as deadly as it is right now.
It is not in the virus's interest to kill the host before it can transmit to somebody else. So what happens in evolutionary terms is that over time, viruses and bacteria tend to become less fatal, less lethal in order to become more transmissible. But if the population at risk is a couple of billion, you don't have to have a very high lethality in order for very many people to die.
And H5N1 is not the only risk. Other strains of flu are also out there, and one of them could someday spark the next pandemic. In Holland in 2003, another avian influenza virus known as H7N7 swept through poultry farms. 30 million chickens were slaughtered. Over 80 people were mildly infected. One person died.
It might well be that we are now focusing on H5N1 and that at the end of the day we will be facing an outbreak from a completely different avian virus. But since it is transmitting to humans and we have seen so many fatal cases already, I think it's good to see this as a real possibility on the one hand, and if it's not going to happen, it may be actually the last warning we get.
Right now, many scientists believe that the warning signs are pointing to H5N1.
I would argue strongly that we're not calling wolf. Sorry I have to paint such a bad picture, but if it gets away, it's a scary situation.
Ominously, US researchers recently confirmed that the deadly 1918 influenza virus also came from birds. Worse still, they found that H5N1 is mutating in similar ways. Now that scientists have sounded the alarm, governments around the world are beginning to prepare for the worst.
And one of the very encouraging things is that the politicians have heard that, my goodness gracious, I have to do something about this. Otherwise, I'm going to be blamed.
Things to declare? Do you have anything to declare?
With urgency growing daily, some countries are already taking action. Airports and border checkpoints are closely monitoring everything coming in. At the top of the list are bird and egg products that could contain H5N1.
4 eggs in them. This is all food. And that actually has the head and the legs intact. Being a whole duck, this is very high risk for us as far as avian influenza, just because it's actually a meat product.
In the event of a bird flu outbreak, major airports have medical personnel on standby and quarantine centers ready to be activated. Most industrialized countries now have plans that identify who is responsible for hospitals functioning, closing public places, and shutting down borders. Many countries are also stockpiling large supplies of antiviral drugs. And now a potentially effective vaccine is on the horizon. The reverse genetic techniques developed in Robert Webster's laboratory have resulted in successful human trials of an H5N1 vaccine. Major manufacturers have been commissioned to produce limited supplies. But the problem remains. Governments have been reluctant to go into full-scale vaccine production without an immediate threat. By then, it would be too late.
Every day it's not done now is a day we'll have to be doing it while the pandemic is on. And every day during the pandemic that we don't have interventions, people will die.
For now, if there is an outbreak of a contagious form of H5N1 among humans, our best hope may be to try to stop it at source with antiviral drugs. That means getting them to those places where the next pandemic is most likely to emerge.
If it isn't contained at source, it will quickly spread worldwide. And then people in my hometown in the western part of North Carolina will share the same risk as the person here in Thailand.
If this virus starts spreading at the rate that flu usually spreads, the consequences are almost unimaginable.
As long as there is a chance that such an emerging virus can be extinguished, it should be tried. This is a global issue. Not succeeding can be forgiven. Not trying is unforgivable.
No one can say if the next flu pandemic is imminent, or if H5N1 will be its cause. For all we know, this virus, though deadly, will never become transmissible through the air. But many scientists say we can't depend on the best-case scenario. They'd rather we prepare for the worst.